This is such a great example of what I call double entrapment. And of course, it covers one of our favourite topics, masculinity, which is absolutely ripe for double entrapment. Now, it comes from Media Watch covering SBS's debate on masculinity. Now, Media Watch used to be a program that would independently analyse media, but here we see the majority of the analysis is on the panel individuals within SBS's The Feed program rather than SBS itself. What I'm going to do is show you some of the things that are happening in the background that you may not be aware of and how they can contribute to double entrapment. We will begin with SBS's introduction of the topic.
We need to pull back a little bit on this over-feminization of the world, over-feminization of the men, this massive idea that all men just need therapy and all the world's problems. No.
Masculinity is in the spotlight. For men.
Right, so first of all, we have one of the producers for SBS, and she's going to set the stage for it. You're not going to hear anything particularly new in this. What I'd like you to pay attention to here is her believe me eyebrows. So in this case, she may not be comfortable in front of the camera as a producer. I'm not sure exactly what's going on, but what you can notice is her eyebrows are raised, and people do this when they are trying to get you to believe what they're saying. Now, in this case, I imagine is probably just nerves or not being in front of the camera, because she's not really going to say anything here that is about believing her.
Men's mental health to shifting gender roles to the influence of the online world.
There we go. Maybe I was wrong about that, because when we see her eyebrows lift is when she talks about the influence of the online world. So this is the first clue that perhaps we're going to be dealing with stuff that's a bit nebulous, a bit loose, and may not actually be grounded in reality. So let's just take another look at where her eyebrows raise and which phrase.
Of the men, this massive idea that all men just need therapy and all the world's problems. No.
Masculinity is in the spotlight. From men's mental health to shifting gender roles to the influence of the online world.
Okay, there you go. So it's the influence of the online world, and I'm starting to think that potentially this is a hit piece where we're going to be talking about general terms. So we might be talking about the influence of the online world, or the impact of online male influences on adolescent teenagers. That's the kind of stuff you can get, which then everyone potentially can buy into these generic terms that are evil without actually analysing the detail beneath it. But let's go on. Let's see who the panellists are, and are they representative of males in the community? Don't know. Well, let's find out.
We've brought together some of the prominent voices online to get into the conversation.
Okay, great. So what really we're hearing here is these guys don't need to be representative of the community, but they may need to be representative of the online community. I don't know where they've chosen them from, how they've chosen them, and they don't specify that. But what they have done is they've given names to everyone, and they've given titles to them. So everyone here has a title. You can read what their role is, and everyone is given equal footing. Now, this is important because we will come back to this when we look at how Media Watch portrays these individuals. But you can see SBS is largely putting them up on an equal platform. They've all got their titles, they've all got names. Great, let's go.
Just a reminder, the views shared here aren't those of SBS, but they are claims and opinions that are...
Now, I want you to look at this setup. Before we even begin, this was the thing that really got me interested in this whole setup, was the seating. This, I just put myself in this situation. Imagine being asked to a panel, and then you're going to be filmed sitting on these particular chairs, and you are being told where to sit. Now, this is important because what I wanted to draw attention to here is that when men get together, there are certain rules and standards or ways of behaving that we will buy into. And to be positioned in a particular way is already setting up a hierarchy or an understanding. So to put this in perspective, men, when they get together, are they going to get together to fight? Are they going to get together to collaborate? There are lots of rules and methods that men use directly and indirectly to establish what is going on in the social atmosphere. So what we actually see when these guys sit down is they're doing a really good job of looking relaxed in what is an impossible physical setup. They are literally perched up onto objects. Now, what's interesting about this is that they all engage with each other, they smile at each other, and so we're not getting the sense that this will necessarily be a fight at this stage. But what's clear is they haven't given these guys much of an opportunity to express themselves or to set up the meritocracy or an understanding of which guys are good at what and what are we going to talk about. So again, I'd just like you to pay attention to their current openness, friendliness to each other. And this is important because Jane Austen, when she used to do, when she was asked about her writing, wrote many, many books, extremely popular author. And she was asked, well, why don't you just have men in your scene that are talking to each other? And her answer was, because I'm not a man and I don't know how men act around each other. And this is a similar situation because you think, as you view this is a group of men getting together, this is standard. Well, it's not. They're all perched high up, they're in a studio, but they do a remarkable job of looking relaxed and being friendly to each other. So let's see how that friendliness plays out.
Being debated online.
All right, so they're all like, okay, maybe they're starting to look a little bit uncomfortable here, but perhaps they're enjoying the humor of the situation, the uncomfortableness, they're bonding from that. But let's see what happens.
Having lots of sexual partners.
Right. So what's important here is I've spoken about the men in the room, but what else is going on in the room? I don't think any of these guys would have said, hey, can we get in a semicircle on some really high perched bar stools that don't allow us to lean back and don't allow us to lean forward? Like, take a look at the guy on the right. He cannot lean back in that chair and he cannot lean forward. He is stuck in a certain position. And you'll notice all these guys immediately have put their hands in front of their groins as a kind of protection, soothing kind of pose. But what's also interesting is the guy in the beige at the back. He has lifted his chin up. He's literally looking down his nose at the producer. And again, let's look at what else is happening in this room. So coming back, we have she is setting the stage. She's got the chairs behind her. We got the contestants or whatever. And then we get a shot of the actual scene.
Having lots.
Okay. So here we can see there's 3 women and a man. So immediately, taking that Jane Austen perspective, we can see this is not a setup where it's only men talking amongst men about masculinity. There are 3 women there. There's another guy there. What has happened before this? Who knows? We don't know what the setup has been. But when you ask who has the power in this room, clearly it is the producer, and she is going to ask the question. So she has framed up the question and presumably has framed up the environment. Now, she may not have chosen those chairs directly, but as a producer, that's her role. That's within her accountability and responsibility. And each of these guys on the panel would respect that, or at least understand that. So let's have a look at how she sets up this first question. And let's bear in mind that none of these panelists have set up the hierarchy or an understanding of what they're there for exactly or how it's going to play out amongst themselves. For instance, we don't know, it's been labelled a debate, but typically debates have rules. So these guys either have been given rules beforehand or they now have to work out the rules amongst themselves in a live environment. And so this first question is important for the guys to establish who will lead, and also to establish what are the rules that they are going to follow and what are the personalities like in the room. These guys potentially don't know each other. They don't know who's a loose cannon. They don't know who they might upset. And they are likely to want to be respectful to each other and to the producer. Now, this puts them into a precarious situation. Through that respect, they may entrap themselves. So let's see what that first question is.
Of sexual partners is tied.
Whoa. Okay, so let's take a look at this and look at the expressions of the guys. So I'm just going to step forward frame by frame. You can see the guy on the left, he's already doing a bit of a side eye. The guy in the middle is smirking. Maybe he knows what's coming. But I want you to pay attention to the guy in the pink. So he's taking in the question. He takes in the smirk. Now three guys are smirking, maybe a fourth as well. And the guy in the pink's kind of taking it in. And then he's rocking back and forwards, trying to work it out, potentially. These other two, the guy on the left and the guy in the middle, they have eyeballed each other. They're sharing a moment. So this is a good start. We see that there are people engaging with each other. The guy on the far right, he's taking in these guys and he's eyeballing them directly. Now, the guy in the beige, he is still looking at the producer and still looking down his nose. And I would call this a form of disdain. And the guy with the glasses and the mustache, a bit hard to read what's going on with him. Overall, he is able to mask his expressions through what he's wearing. Curiously, he's the only one with feet crossed at this stage, so he's kind of double blocking there. But the guy in the pink, let's go and have a look at what happens to him. I love this because this is part of like seeing inside someone's brain a little bit, and you can kind of guess what he's thinking, but obviously, you might be wrong. There he goes. Something's come to him. So he's been thinking, and then his eyebrow is just like, whoa, what am I in for? And maybe at a subconscious level, these guys are working out, maybe I've been entrapped here. Now, what's interesting is the language for this first question. Okay, we've established it's coming from the producer, but it's set up as a claim. Now, it's not in a debate, someone speaking for it, someone speaking against it, but it's a claim. And that's such an interesting word to use because it's kind of saying someone is claiming this, or it is a claim, because claim is personal, like it relates to someone saying something. It's not just a statement or something. So it's a position, and it's a position that's coming from someone. But I want you to see the trap specifically that this question sets up, and it comes in the first word. And the first word is having. And the key here is that is about the present tense. That is not about, you have had lots of sexual partners and your previous sexual exploits, for want of a better word, are tied to your status demand. It's about having in the present time. And here is the first trap. If any of these guys have many sexual partners and they believe it is tied to their status as a man, then how and when they reveal that quantity of sexual partners in their life is part of the status. In other words, it's not the fact itself, but how that fact is revealed. And we know that humans tend to not be overt in bragging about their sexual partners, if they have many, because we also know that it has implications for the sexual partners. And so if we take any of these individuals, and let's say one of them currently has 5 sexual partners and believe it is tied to his status as a man, and in his local community it is known that he has 5 sexual partners, but is known in an indirect way, then this does 2 things. Number one, it potentially protects those women if they don't want to have reputational damage by being known as being polyamorous or being one of a harem, or whatever it is. So in other words, those women may choose to be with that man and have other women with that man, or they may not know that there are other women with that man. There are many different variations that are possible in this situation. And even if we just take the kind of classic one, which is that he's a guy, he has many sexual partners at the moment, and they do not know about each other, and they think that they're the only one. Again, why would he reveal this in this forum? So this setup is, in and of itself, a little bit of a trap, or is it a trap for any individual who believes he has high status through having many sexual partners. Now let's flip it around. Now imagine a guy here who doesn't have any sexual partners, may not have had many previous sexual partners. How does he then relate to these guys in the circle? Does he declare that and then become someone who can't really comment to this particular topic, so excuses himself from this conversation because if you don't have that direct experience, you cannot be credentialed and talk about it. And that would be a standard for men in any meritocracy. And then we take another example, which is maybe one of these guys is in, or maybe all of them, so some of them are in a monogamous relationship. So they then could potentially talk about that. But the other aspect that is important here is something I spoke about earlier, which is how are these guys going to relate to each other, and what does this first question set up in terms of who can speak first to it, and what are they going to say that is going to allow the other guys to join in the conversation or excuse themselves or even crack a joke, right? Like this is primed for humor. But one of the things that's important here is there is an implied question that is likely going through all these guys' minds. Well, maybe I'm wrong about that. That could be mind reading. I won't say that. But look, guys are often about numbers, right? So these guys may actually be now calculating how many sexual partners they currently have or have had. And they're going, is that a lot compared with the guys around me? And do I want to reveal that? You know, there's a lot of questions in there. This is not an easy answer. Anyway, I've been crapping on a lot on that, but it just goes to show you how set up this is and how set up to fail you are. From my perspective, when I look at this, I can see that it's a trap. And so I would be attacking that question directly and attacking the question, and I would be pulling it apart, and I would rather a question like, you know, who are the guys in your life that had a lot of status, and what status was conveyed as a result of their sexual history or something, right? Like to bring up the ability for people to tell stories. But this is not a question that allows you to build stories, and it's not really a debate question because it's a little bit too complex. So let's see what happens next. By the way, the link to these original clips is in the description below. I've watched them twice, and in both cases, it's been painful to watch. But I think it's important from a power perspective.
And Clayton, you're laughing. You're starting this one.
Right, here we go. I had spoken about how these guys need to establish who will go first, who's going to set the tone. And again, we look at who has the power in the room, and the person with the power is the producer. So she is choosing who to go first. And these guys, they're going to respect that. They're not going to say, no, I think I should go first. It's a difficult topic, so they're probably all potentially a little uncomfortable or even thinking about how to answer it. But she has singled out an individual and told him he is to go first. So let's see how she does that and his reaction. So here's the reaction of all the guys. they're listening.
Partners is tied to your status as a man. Clayton, you're laughing, you're starting this one.
Now, the important thing there is he wasn't laughing when we saw this clip. So it is possible that they did pause at this stage and did not show us what actually happens here. So again, let's have a look and see if he was laughing. But
Having lots of sexual partners is tied to your status as a man.
Okay, so he's looking uncomfortable. He does not look like he's laughing. The guy on the left is laughing, but he's not laughing. So I think what has happened here is something weird has gone on. So maybe someone has done what I have said and gone, what kind of a question is this? What rules are we playing to? What is actually going on? So they may have been direct in saying, hey, this isn't right. Can we start again and do a different one? And then maybe they talked about it a bit. He makes a joke, people laugh, and then she says, well, you're laughing, so you go first. I suspect there is a large cut here, which does a lot of disservice to these guys, potentially, depending on what conversation happened between this question and the cut.
Clayton, you're laughing, you're starting this one.
If I had to give one simple answer, no.
And again, all that laughter is these guys being uncomfortable and a little bit like, hey, sucked in, Clayton, you get to go first. No one's fighting him for it, right?
Laughing, you're starting this one.
If I had to give one.
And he also does a big lean back, like, oh, is this really what's going on? And he does, I've watched this once or twice, and he does a bit of a word salad here. So he starts off, but again, what I read from this is he's not aware of what the guys around him are looking for, what the producers are looking for, and he's still fishing to find out what is really going on here and what is the right way to react. Simple answer, no. I think if you're a man and you have what I class as like inherently manly traits, so like you're a man of pursuit, if you're a person of morals and principles, if you're doing it with the right intention, with being honest up front, is it needed to be a man? No. So it's a bit of a word salad because you're sort of saying like you don't need many partners to be a man, it's not needed. Then he talks about intent and drive. Is he talking about sexual partners or are you talking about something else? He's talking about masculine traits. So he's a bit all over the place. It's a bit unclear whether he's talking about sexual partners or not. Can it make you better as a man? I think yes. I think there's merit to it. But I don't like the idea of a super high body count in women, if I'm completely honest. And I think and so he does what people often do in uncomfortable situations, which is deflect. He doesn't quite know how to answer the question. It's a difficult question to answer. And this is very, very common in men getting together in groups. He's gone somewhere super comfortable. He's gone, basically he's indicating he's not comfortable talking about this particular topic. And you'll see in a moment why that is the case. And he goes somewhere where he is comfortable, where he can talk about numbers that aren't related to him. And if he talks about a woman having a high body count, he's not talking about himself and his own sexual history. He's talking about a woman's sexual history. So he has the attention of the other guys now. That previously they were looking down, they were a bit uncomfortable. Now he's got people's attention. It's probably hypocritical of me to say go sleep with heaps of women because I believe in purity and preservation. He also indicates it would be hypocritical. So he's kind of indicating to himself, hey, look, it would be hypocritical of me to say it's fine for a guy to sleep with lots of women when I'm looking for a partner, in his way of saying it, when I'm looking for a partner, I'm looking for purity. Now,
so
100%, yeah.
What do you mean?
With purity.
Well, okay, so he said when he uses the word purity, he's using it in a particular context. And this is important because SBS throw context over top. Now, anytime you see context or fact-checking, you need to understand that that is always a persuasive argument. That is not there to give facts or context. It is there for persuasion. And again, we see this entrapment in the sense of the use of these kind of devices. And so they've picked out some research or a particular context and they're applying it to what he is saying. And what's interesting about this is he talks about purity, but the context is about purity culture. And there is a big difference there, because when he talks, he's talking about his preference, and he expands upon his preference in a way that is different to this particular context. And so I looked up, well, what is purity culture? Because words matter. And purity culture is different to what he's speaking about. There are some crossovers in the sense of, for want of a better word, the body count, or how many sexual partners a woman can have, in a purity culture sense. And he's talking about the same thing from a woman's perspective. But purity culture also often implies a religious aspect and an overall culture and some norms that surround that activity or that choice, rather than the choice itself. And so this context is expanding upon what he's saying, but it is slightly different. And as I said, I think that the use of the word context and fact-checking in these areas is a persuasive tool. They have chosen to provide context around this statement, but if I go back a little bit and I just pick a statement at random, let's see what he has to say.
Really honest, and I think it's probably hypocritical of me to say go sleep with heaps of women, because
They could have fact-checked hypocritical. They could have fact-checked why are men hypocritical, or any sorts of things, but they've chosen this particular one, and they've chosen it presumably because there is an aspect of harm around it. And the harm is for women. So here we go. In this case, women exposed to these beliefs reporting more fear, pain, and disgust during sex. But again, it says some women, so we don't know if that's a significant proportion or not. And we don't know if that's to do with purity or purity culture, and where those norms and beliefs come from, whether it comes from women or men, the community, how that's happening. So they've set him up already as someone who's into purity culture, but he hasn't finished explaining what he means, because the guys actually ask him directly, hey, can you clarify that? Can you give us more detail?
with purity and preservation. I personally believe and have the belief that...
So he's talking about his belief, his personal beliefs. At this stage, he's not pushing those beliefs on anyone else, but he's saying, here's my personal belief.
The lower a woman's body count, the better for her.
And here he says the lower a woman's body count. So again, the purity is like no bodies, no sexual contact. And he's saying the lower, the better.
And for her future partner. Like, I've slept with my...
Oh, okay. So, and this is an area where I think he starts to potentially know that he is trapped, because he's talking about a future partner, and then he talks about sexual partners, and he makes a distinction there, but it's almost as if he's aware, again, this is mind reading, but he's aware that stepping into that territory between that difference is a bit of a minefield.
That the lower a woman's body count, the better for her and for her future partner. Like, I've slept with my number, like my share of women, right?
There you go. This is one of the key phrases that we have in this whole series. I spoke about these guys getting together. There's lots of things they're thinking potentially, but a lot of stuff that potentially is not said. And they're also aware there are norms about things you do not talk about in this particular environment. And one of those things would be the number. These guys are all thinking about the number for them specifically, because that is how the question was raised. And so he begins by mentioning that. He acknowledges that and then quickly changes it to share. So he talks about having a number of women, realizes he's now, well, I think he's probably realizing he's in a territory that's going to get very dangerous for him as an individual. And so he moves it to share, which is not a number.
Count, the better for her and for her future partner. Like, I've slept with my number, like my share of women, right? And had a great connection with them, and I don't look at a woman any.
Again, why are we seeing the producer?
With my number, like my share of women, right? And had a great connection with...
So why are they showing the shot of the producer at this stage? I don't know, because this, again, from an analysis of power perspective, this is about setting her up as the power. And again, the power here is that she's observing these guys. She's literally got monitors in front of her. She's crossed off and she's holding her hand over her mouth, which is often a sign of resisting the temptation to speak while she's smiling. So it's this particular setup is so that you, as an audience member, agree with her, or you feel a connection to her, because you may also want to say something. You may also find this humorous, ridiculous, or whatever the situation is.
And I don't look at a woman any less because of it. However, if it's going to be the mother of my children and she's going to be a representation of me, I don't want 20 other men able to say, yeah, I've been with her, bro. And if she is...
And here we go. He stated his personal preference. I think he said something like, well, whatever she wants to do, that's up to her. But if she's going to be the mother of my children. So he's positioning this fictional woman as someone that he wants to partner with. And what's important here is the sense of shame. So in this example, he's basically going, hey, women can do whatever they want, but I don't want to be shamed by going up to other guys who have slept with her. So if he's in a social situation, and again, the question came down to status, so sexual partners and status, he has changed that question away from his own sexual partners to his wife's number of sexual partners and what that would do to his status and his sense of shame. So he talks about 20 other dudes.
Representation of me. I don't want 20 other men able to say, yeah, I've been with her, bro. And if she is a chink in the armor, that directly affects every other area of our life, whether we like.
And so for him, he's talking about that as a status for him, but more of a team aspect, that it affects both of their lives, not just his, but her life, the life they are building together. So I would imagine he is a guy that is probably about building together with a partner as opposed to living completely separate lives. I could be wrong about that, but that's the way he's describing it.
Or not.
There can be dickheads out there that have had sex with lots of women. I know plenty of those guys. Then there's also just humble guys who haven't really had much sex, and they can be nice guys as well. I don't really think it's specific.
This guy, again, does a bit of a word salad, but he's basically saying, however much sex you've had, I don't think it relates to status. That's effectively what he's saying.
Typically linked to whether you're a strong, cool, masculine man at all.
The hypocrisy is something that really does...
Now, this guy takes the personal preference approach. So the other guy had spoken about, hey, my personal preference for someone I want to marry into the future is to have a woman who doesn't have many sexual partners, and I don't want to meet other men and be thinking, were you previously a sexual partner of her, because that would give me shame, and it's a problem for our relationship and a chink in our armor. Like that's his personal preference. But he's not saying that he wouldn't sleep with such a woman, and he's not saying that she shouldn't be able to sleep with anyone else. He's just saying, hey, it's out for me. Oh, and by the way, I think it's probably better for you, but that's up to you. This guy comes out and he goes off on the personal preference, and he talks about women's personal preference.
For me, like, why is it such an issue to some men that some women do want to sleep around, but then like one of their mates are sleeping around heaps, and they're like, oh, good job, man, but then to the girl it's like, no, that's not on. And that's interesting. Like, I respect 100% what you're saying. You wouldn't want to be with an individual that has slept around, and I'm the same. But when it's within a friendship circle and a girl's getting bagged out for it, man, I don't care what you're doing. You do you.
Exactly.
Leave them alone. Like, it's a personal preference.
Doesn't bother me.
Again, so what they fail to do here is they haven't really set up, do they want these women who are sleeping with multiple guys, do they want them as their partner? And if they don't want them as their partner, how are they going to treat them? Are they going to ostracize them or treat them any differently to anyone else? And this other guy basically says, no, you're the same. You're the same as me. There's equality here. You do you, I'll do me. But what they don't address is that their personal preference might be not to. Well, actually, I think he might have said that, like that he wouldn't consider her a future wife or whatever. But yeah.
Interesting. Like I respect 100% what you're saying. You wouldn't want to be with an individual that has slept around, and I'm the same.
So there you go. So he said, I don't want to be with that individual in a partnership, but if you're a friend, you're in a social group, he's fine with it. Whether that's true or not is a different matter. But again, they're pushing the personal preference, and perhaps what the subtext here is, what they're not saying is, how will most guys feel about it, or how will particular guys feel about it?
But when it's within a friendship zone, like it's a personal preference.
Doesn't bother me.
Yeah, and that's fair for me.
I'm not going to try and break it down on an intellectual level. I just find a chick that's been with way too many guys, I find that unattractive.
All right, so this guy, again, because it's safe, he can just talk about what he finds attractive and unattractive. And whether he's joining in for his own reasons or whatever, again, now we're just back in personal preference. My personal preference is that I don't find these people attractive. And that's really hard to argue against, right? Like, what are you going to say? You should go and do re-education and find certain people attractive and other people unattractive. At a certain level, you have to take people on face value when they say, I'm not interested, which is a great saying, or I'm not attracted to this person. Because what are you going to do about that? You're going to say, no, you must be attracted to this person, or no, you must be interested. And then it just goes a bit sideways for a bit. But what's interesting is, again, the guy on the left here with the beige pants on, he's going to provide some clarity on what he means by it. So these guys, they're going to be like, what do you mean specifically? Whether they say it implicitly or explicitly, and he's going to feel a need to explain what he means, which he does.
I don't want that.
Fantastic.
I want to be her first.
Who gives a shit?
If God willing said design your perfect woman and said put a body count on the chart of what she's.
I think God's busy, man. I think God's got bigger.
So Tarang, you said you don't care, but you said it doesn't matter to you. So let's say you had a magic button. Say they're identical twins and you get to choose this. It's going to affect you.
Medieval.
I thought that was weird.
I don't know. Like,
The only bi people here.
perfect person because the perfect. I can't say I've ever thought about it in that way before. That the perfect person because the perfect person does not exist, right?
Yeah.
I just think that something you said, Chris, I found really profound, which is that the way women will be judged, right, for being promiscuous in a way that men rarely, if ever, are, right? That kind of social conditioning and the acceptability of that is something that I have a problem with. Because to me, it's like we either judge everyone here or we judge no one. And I think
I agree.
when it comes to this, as long as people are safe and consensual, we shouldn't be judging anyone.
I agree with that.
Right?
It is double standards and it is misogyny. It's internalized misogyny. It's something that you're saying for you to date them, you need to have a requirement that you need to.
Do you think he's a misogynist?
Hang on.
Next to you, and if you don't have that number count, I'm not going to date
Do you
you.
think he's a misogynist?
Hang on. No. Can I come back and do a question? What about the women that expect 6-foot men, over $200,000 salaries? They want muscles. They want this and that.
You're ticking all these boxes, man. Like, stop
I'm under
leaving.
6
Well, hey, here we go. There's a lot of things being said in that whole segment which are flying under the radar. So the guy in the pink here, when the other guy was speaking, says, oh, you're not the only bi guy here. I've slept with guys, or something to that extent. I could be wrong about what he said, but it's bringing to the fore that there are potentially 3 gay guys there, or bisexual guys there, or queer guys, whatever you want to say around it, in a group of 6 men. Now that's pretty high average compared with the standard population, but this is not the standard population. It's online commentators, so there's all sorts of things may contribute to that. But what it does do is it changes how these guys are relating to each other, and it means that they're going to need to be specific when they're talking about sexual partners. Are they talking about male or female? Like, there are different drives behind that, and it's almost a very stilted conversation as a result of that. But this guy on the left here, he's again, I guess, calling out a bit of the double standards, you know, that everyone's been talking about preferences, and he's like, well, what about women who are preferring tall guys? And again, one of the key moments just happened because someone says the thing that had to be said at some point, which is, where do we all rank? Because fundamentally, this first question was a ranking question. How are you guys going to rank each other through this conversation? Now, until now, no one has performed rank other than the producer, who asked the first guy to speak, which obviously gives him the platform, but also makes him the target. And, you know, there's a male model on this panel. There's this guy over here. And finally, we get a little bit of direct conversation, and here it is.
Salaries, they want muscles, they want this and that.
You're ticking all these boxes, man. Like,
So here he goes. He says, hey, you are the guy. You are the guy here. And what's interesting is, like, how are people going to react to this? Are they going to go, yep, you're the guy? Or are they going to go, hey, dude with the glasses, you don't know what you're talking about?
I'm under 6 foot.
leave.
Hang on,
Easy for you
I'm
to
going to
say.
clear that up.
And then basically we get the other guy in the pink, you know, it's easy for you to say, again, acknowledging, hey, you're the man here that if anyone has multiple sexual partners right now, it's likely to be you. And though if anyone here has had multiple sexual partners in the past, it's likely to be you, because you're ticking the boxes that we know that women like. I mean, even this guy on the far right here, who's a male model, who would have had his fair share of female attention, he knows what's going down. But he can't say anything either, because this is kind of like what you can't speak about, but they bring it up and it breaks the ice.
But let's be serious here. Like, it's not fair in this day and age that women expect X, Y, Z out of men a lot of the time, and that is factual, and they're considered empowered women for wanting that. But then if a bloke says, oh, sorry, you've slept with too many men, we're the dickhead. No, hang on a second. Like, it's
As a
true,
bi man, though,
very-
would you choose that if you're looking for a male?
What I don't like is that this guy in the pink is asking personal questions in terms of what is your preference, whereas the guy on the left had introduced a topic where they potentially could go in a really interesting direction. But the guy on the pink just returns it to personal thing. And this is partly the reason why I wanted to speak about this, because you can look at stuff like this on a very shallow surface, like, I don't like him because of X, but I'm more interested here in, like, what is the power subtext that's going on underneath all of this. And I haven't even got to the how Media Watch portray it, but this is a good setup, because Media Watch will take some of these views and just, yeah, I guess that's where we talk about double entrapment, but that's to come. Let's see what's next.
Partner, and you could tend.
I would be a John, they've slept power.
Deal with that, I think. Like, what about values, though? It's like if it's 5, 10, just to put it out there, like, I'm like, I can deal with that, I think.
Again, now we start to get to numbers. So these guys have avoided numbers. This guy had said, ideally, it's 0. But now he's providing the actual clarity to all these guys so they know where he's coming from. And he goes, 5, 10, I can deal with that. So he's basically putting numbers around it, and people can understand whether they like it or not is a different question. But they go, okay, here's a guy. This is what is acceptable to him when he's choosing a future partner. Yeah, 5 to 10 guys. Yeah, he can live with that. Now, that's important, because that is potentially a little bit different to the purity context that they provided, SBS provides, because he's now expanded on that. Now, what if he had started this whole conversation with, look, if a woman has 5 to 10 sexual partners, I would still consider her as a future partner, but I would think twice for a woman who had more than that, and here are my reasons for doing so, X, Y, Z. Like, it would have been a different kind of feed into this particular topic. But either way, he has provided his viewpoint and he has provided the numbers around it, and it differs from the fact-checking context that they have provided. I think it gets a little bit boring here from memory, but we'll see.
And again, I acknowledge this is judgmental, but it's not the number so much as the values that have to go in place, because if she's a beautiful woman, she can sleep with 1,000 men in the space of a month.
So I think he's really, again, word saladed this. So it's hyperbole. Like, I think anyone can talk about this, the word 1,000, and it's hyperbole. Like, no one's thinking literally 1,000 in a month, right? Like, I think what he's really saying in a more hyperbolic sense is that if you switch it around, and again, he's talking a bit of yin and yang, so rather than talking about him and multiple sexual partners, he's talking about his partner with multiple sexual partners, because he's obviously feeling more comfortable than talking about himself and his own number, as we saw, as he stopped talking about numbers. But, you know, again, if we take that viewpoint that he's talking yin and yang, he's really talking about himself in the sense that he doesn't want to show his own weakness, but, well, again, that might be mind reading. But it would be weaker for him to say, I can't sleep with 1,000 women in a month, even if I wanted to and even if I could. It's just not going to happen. Whereas, if you change the context here to say, if a woman wanted to sleep with 1,000 men in a month, she could get a queue of like 10,000 guys lining up, and those who wait the longest in line can be part of the 1,000. In other words, it's not really about the number and the literal how many men she could sleep with, but more the sense that in today's society, and in most societies in general, women can sleep with multiple men through choice if they choose to do so, whereas men cannot sleep with multiple women if they just make that choice that they would like to. There's a difference between liking to do something and it being a distinct possibility. And overall, I would call this context almost like an Asperger context. Like, it is extremely literal. How literal is he? I'm going to go back and have a look.
Values that have to go in place, because if she's a beautiful woman, she can sleep with 1,000.
Okay, so he has said if she's a beautiful woman, she can sleep with 1,000 men. And I don't know why he says beautiful woman. She could be incredibly ugly. You'll still get guys lining up. We know this is the case.
Men in the space of a month easily if she wants to. What I'm interested in is purity, devotion, love, femininity.
The thing I struggle with is the idea that it's like pure or self-preservation around women. To me, that at its core signals an imbalance of power, perhaps control, or something remotely related to.
It's the same as a car. Like, this is a crude example.
Women are not cars, bro.
No,
Women are not cars.
Do you take care of your car? Like, not to say that she's less big.
I just don't think he's a particularly good communicator. Again, a little bit of word salad. People are very visual and very literal. When you mention car, people are thinking literally a car, literally a woman is a car, right? Like, he's trying to explain something in an abstract terms, but it's not in a great.
Can I throw?
But it is inherently that.
So the guy on the left with the muscles, he's maybe sensing that this guy's out of his depth, and he's like, I want to throw something in.
Is it okay for you then to have a
But the other guys are seeing a little bit of a target, and they're going for him.
higher body count than a prospective female partner?
Ideally not, but the fact is, do I? And yes. So is it somewhat hypocritical for me to say it from a...
Now, what's interesting about how these guys go at him is the guy with the mustache asks a specific question with detail to understand his position. So although they're going at him, they're doing it to go, hey, I'm going to give you a chance. If you can explain what you're saying and give me some numbers and some reasoning behind it, I might be able to listen. So even though they're attacking him, there is a genuine question there.
Numbers standpoint only, yeah.
So you f*** yourself over because you're f***ing too much before. Is that what you're saying? Like if you're trying to meet someone now and
no,
it's
no,
like
I'm
50,
fine.
you're like, oh shit.
I think men are only, if men do it with intention, we're only better from having multiple sexual partners. There's no downside for a man doing it because you're better at sex.
Just jumping in, can we?
So again, he's trying to make a point that you become better at sex. He puts out his fingers, he's going to make a number of points, and we have a cut. And we get back to the power source in the room, and it's the producer. Now, if you have a look at the screen that's in front of her, the guy with the muscles, he's eye blocking, so his eyes are shut, he's licking his lips. The guy next to him is pursing his lips. So these are indirect signs that they do not appreciate the interruption, but they're also respecting it.
Hear from Mitch Evans.
So again, the guy with the muscles now eyeballs up, but his lips are tight. The guy in the pink, his open mouth.
Haven't heard from you.
He squeezes his lips, and they all turn to look at the guy that she has pointed out.
I want to contribute to this one. It's kind of derailed a bit. I think we move on.
Can I say?
So he's like, I'm not going to participate. So what that means for the rest of the guys, they're like, I don't know where you stand. So he's the unknown at the moment because the other guys have declared their hands. They know where they stand. And, this is meant to be a debate on masculinity. There is an aspect of this where the guy who has not shown his hand does not yet deserve respect from these guys. So you can see when he says that, they literally turn away from him. So let's take a look as this guy says, look, I just don't want to really contribute. I think it's derailed. You will notice that
I really
these
want to
guys turn
contribute
around.
to this one.
So they're all looking at him. We're going to pay attention to you. You've been given the floor to speak. We're all looking at you. What have you got to say?
Kind of derailed a bit. I think we move on.
All right. So the guy with the pink, he might agree, but he is immediately, I'm not looking at you anymore.
Can I say one?
And the other guys are like, okay, they just move on. so he's not relevant, this guy in the corner, to any of these guys at this stage. He might be wrong, he might be right, he might have his views on why it's derailed, but he potentially would have got them all in if he had explained why it has been derailed.
Thing, please.
Yes.
As like a wrap up, what I find really interesting about this conversation is that the prompt was.
Now, the thing to learn from this guy is whoever does the summary wins. So his summary, whatever it is, doesn't matter. He is the winner. He also has asked for permission to do it, and the producer's given him permission, and I think the other guys around him to do it as well. So let's see how he does that.
Contribute to this one. It's kind of derailed a bit. I think we move on.
Can I say one?
So they're looking at him. He's asking a question, and he's asking it of the producer.
Thing, please.
Yes.
And she gives him a clear yes, like, yes, please, like, let's get out of this situation. The other guys...
As like a wrap up, what I find...
I don't know, why'd that guy do his
Derailed a
hand
bit.
movement?
I think we move on.
Can I say one thing, please?
Yes.
As like a wrap up, what I find really interesting...
I don't know what that guy was doing with his hand movements. So
I think we move on.
Can I say one thing, please?
Yes.
As like a wrap up, what I find really interesting about this conversation is that the prompt was that the more sex a man has is an indicator of his status as a man. And we've wound up being a group of men who are discussing, with the exception of Mitch, who saw that it got derailed, talking about how much sex women are having.
The flip side to that is
I just think
almost every woman that I know in my circles does think a man that has had a lot of sexual partners is a higher value male.
Can we go back to
and so what's interesting about that, I talked about whoever does the summary wins. The guy in the pink goes, hey, you're not providing the summary. I'm going to provide the summary. So he lets him provide the summary to an extent and then just jumps in and goes, no, I'm going to do it. This is my view. And again, it's, more of a personal
Sarang and
preference than
finish
anything
this segment, please?
Sure. Oh, that was all I was saying. Was just that I think it's interesting that we've externalized.
So she then goes, no, we're going back to dude with glasses and mustache. Is that? Yeah. And we're going to get him to finish it off. Now, he fails here because he goes, oh, that's all I wanted to say. So it's a bit like that guy in the beige, where when called upon, he goes, oh, I've got nothing to add, etc. This guy does the same thing. I have nothing to add. These are not leadership qualities. These are not masculine qualities. So what we're really seeing is a number of guys ruling themselves out in this discussion.
And projected onto women rather than
That's
going.
because we're men, so we can talk about our experiences.
So he's going, no, you're not summarising. Hey, I'm going to summarise.
So that's kind of how conversations
next
work.
prompt, please.
And she allows that. So she goes, okay, we're just going to move on. But Mr. Pink here, he's won. He did the summary. But if you don't do it well, as he did not, you don't earn the respect either. So at the moment, we've got a lot of guys who have been placed in a position where they disrespect each other.
Men are wired to be more aggressive.
All right, so I'm not going to cover any more of this. I'm going to take what we've learnt from that. I'm going to go back over to Media Watch, who used to cover things like this and address how the media outlet dealt with it. But you'll notice they started to attack the panellists. But maybe I'll just show you one more thing from this, which is as they build in the new topic, just watch Mr. Muscles out there.
Conversations
Next
work.
prompt, please. Men are wired to be more aggressive. And Taranga.
So he's kind of like swaying and like, yeah. Again, none of these guys are comfortable in the chairs. So let's rip over and see how the double entrapment happens when Media Watch cover this particular session. And I've only shown a short section of it, but I can come back to
segment as a conversation between prominent online voices on what it means to be a modern man, with a spicy first topic to get.
And again, what you need to pay attention to with Media Watch and with any of these kind of traditional outlets, or any persuasion for that matter, is the choice of words. And so we've just seen a little bit of that whole first session, and she is using the word spicy. Now, when we use that word, or when we hear that word spoken about, it's often around, in Australian media, around OnlyFans models who are doing spicy content, which is just a shorthand word. Spicy is just a shorthand word for, well, other words that are less socially acceptable. And it's a salacious word, right? Like, it's like, oh, there's some spicy content coming up, and it's designed for you to pay attention. So she has set this up as if there is spicy content coming up. And spicy tends to be about, to be clear, about sexual acts and movements and the mechanics, etc., and the shame and embarrassment potentially, etc. So that's her setup, but there is nothing, I would say, nothing spicy about what those guys spoke about in terms of the sexual mechanics, the sexual acts. There is nothing spicy about it. In fact, it's almost like they did the opposite. They deliberately avoided moving into that territory. But she has framed that up in this way, and that's important because when you set the frame, you set people's expectations. So she's now setting it up at, here are some guys who are going to be talking about sexual acts, which immediately positions them in a particular way. And I think it demeans them, but we'll see how this flows through.
Things going.
Having lots of sexual partners is tied to your status as a man.
But in an instant, the conversation pivoted to women and male disapproval of their sex lives. And
again, amazing use of language. Male disapproval of their sex lives. Again, we're looking at how this is set up. Spicy conversation with male disapproval of their sex lives. So the first thing we can think about here is just the use of power in that phrase is phenomenal, and it's multi-layered. But one of the first layers is male. Okay, so we've got some male disapproval. So it's not just 6 panelists. It's not just an individual on the panel. It's males as a whole and disapproving of women's sex lives. And when she's talking about sex lives, really in this case, it's a very broad term which can mean anything. It can mean women who sleep with lots of men. It can mean women who sleep with no men. But ultimately, there is disapproval coming from men, is how she has set this up. Because if you did not watch any more of this clip, then you don't know exactly what she's going to be talking about in this sense. And if you do watch the clip, and this is my main point, she has set the framework for how you should think about it. Whether you do or not, it's a framework that is set by her. So again, spicy, male disapproval, women's sex lives. And yeah, let's go.
If you didn't know, a person's body count, which you're about to hear referred to, means the number of sexual partners they've had.
The lower one's body count, that's for her and for the future partner. And she's going to be a representation of me. I don't want 20 other men able to say, yeah, I've been with her, bro.
That was Clayton Harrup, who calls himself a hypnotherapist.
Wow. So she's... This is important because now she's going to set up the panellists. So she's going to talk about the identity of the panellists rather than what they're saying. So she's introduced a term, body count, and the way she's kind of said it is a negative, right? Like that it refers to, if you didn't know, so maybe you're under a rock is kind of what I would say, but she's making it seem like this is a fringe topic, body count, that no one's ever heard of it. But it's, to me, it's just a very common saying, and it's neither negative nor positive. It's just literally a number. Again, males tend to think in terms of metrics. Let's have a listen to her talk about that again.
Yeah, I've been with her, bro.
That was Clayton Harrup, who calls himself a hypnotherapist and performance coach. He was joined by Chris Catalaris and...
Right. So what we get now is a real difference between how SBS set up the session, and again, we might call it entrapment, but here's the double entrapment. She has talking about the guy down the bottom, Clayton Harrup, but now when she talks about the other guys, she shows them on screen and she shows their titles. And the difference is pretty massive here, right? Like, let's explore how let's listen to how she explained what Clayton Harrup is. So when I read the screen, I can see he's a men's coach. And I can see other people's titles here. But let's look at the difference in how she explains what he is and how she explains how the other guys are.
Men able to say, yeah, I've been with her, bro.
That was Clayton Harrup.
First of all, that was Clayton Harrup. So it's like the past tense. Hey, it might sound minor, but it's still past tense.
Who calls himself a hypnotherapist and performance coach.
And you might have missed that.
That was Clayton Harrup, who calls himself a hypnotherapist.
How many times do you hear someone say, calls himself, and you don't think that guy's a liar, right? Like, if I was to say Anthony Albanese calls himself the Prime Minister, am I respecting his position? Or am I actually saying, well, he's calling himself Prime Minister, but is he really? Right? And you could say again for her, she's on Media Watch. She calls herself a presenter, but is she really? Right? Like, these are the kind of subtexts that are in these kind of phrases. And what you'll notice throughout this is the peppering of these ways of thinking. And again, I would call this the double entrapment, because this is about training you potentially how to think. It seems very, very minor, but the difference is she's not giving this individual guy the same status as the other guys. And the other aspect is, who's the person in power here? Well, she is, because she's on screen. So she talks about him, but he's not shown. So we do that when we talk about people and don't allow them to represent themselves. And so I might talk about, again, Anthony Albanese as the Australian Prime Minister, but if I'm on screen, then it's me talking about him, not him representing himself.
And performance coach. He was joined by Chris Catalaris, an online coach and mentor.
And that's interesting because he was joined by. So again, a fantastic phrasing, because it's setting it up as if Clayton is there and then these other guys joined him. Not that the feed SBS collected a group of guys and had a session with them. Like, you know, it's almost like they've said Clayton is the guy, and he has asked these other guys to join him, or he has chosen these other guys to join him. But it's a very interesting use of phrasing, because again, you get very Asperger and go, oh, well, it doesn't mean anything. But the choices of these words matter because it's setting up a villain and an entrapment.
Dean Wells, a former contestant from Married at First Sight. Mitch Wallace, a mental health speaker. Dean Wells,
So again-
he was joined by Chris Cavalaris.
So let's just look at where and how she differs in their description from what is written underneath each of them. By the way, I've got this on double speed. She doesn't normally speak that fast, but I cannot watch it at normal speed anymore.
An online coach and mentor. Dean Wells, a former contestant from Married at First Sight. Mitch Wallace, a mental health speaker.
Well. And again, here we start to see a little bit of a hierarchy set up, not amongst the guys themselves, which I talk about. Guys get together, they often indirectly set up a hierarchy and a respect mechanism. And instead here, the guys that get the mention individually on screen are what we would call the more progressive guys, right? So when we come back here, I think saying formula, Dean Wells, it's got former reality TV star. Now, she provides a bit more context on what show it was, but I think it's largely accurate. She talks about the first guy, Chris, as an online coach mentor, so she reads his statement. But once we get to the mental health speaker and the advocate against men's violence, these guys get a full screen shot.
A former contestant from Married at First Sight. Mitch Wallace, a mental health speaker. Tarantula, an advocate against men's violence. And Jeff Kasubi, an online commentator on diversity and...
And what's interesting about this one is, again, what is not said or what is changed. So she describes him as an online speaker against a speaker for diversity or something like that, but drops the word model, and she's thrown in diversity. So it's like, here are the villains and here are the good guys.
Inclusion. And as for those sexist comments on women's... And as for those sexist comments on women's so-called body count from Wells and Harrup, which opened the debate, they continued for more than 6 minutes and included hot take.
Okay, so again, if you haven't watched what we have watched, you start to question, okay, were those comments sexist in their entirety, and did those sexist comments continue for 6 minutes? Like, there's no allowance for nuance here whatsoever. If you haven't watched the SBS program and the way that this Media Watch is edited, you are already led to believe that the sexist comments, A, existed, and B, continued for 6 minutes. And I want you to see how much collusion there is between SBS and ABC in the way that this is framed. Because again, SBS decide the context and the fact-checking, not the participants in the panel. And so how Media Watch then take those fact-checks and context and progress them into a new narrative is what you're going to see next.
It's like this.
I just want to check this in with way too many guys.
Hot take, open the debate. They can...
But again, because, Media Watch is young and hip, they're using particular phrases like spicy and hot take and gem. And what this enables them to do is have plausible deniability around their influence or the influence of the words they're using. Because they can say, oh yeah, well, we're just being young and hip, right? Like, Media Watch has been around for a long time. We've got to reach a new audience. So we're going to use young and hip language like hot takes and spicy content because that's what the people want, But really what's happening here is when you hear someone say hot takes like this, are you expecting an erudite response? Are you expecting someone to be expanding on something in detail? No, you're expecting an idiot.
Some women's so-called body count from Wells and Harrup, which opened the debate, they continued for more than 6 minutes and included hot takes like this.
I just want to check this in with way too many guys. I find that unattractive.
It's a similar car.
So we have seen previously it wasn't cut like this, but again, it's just personal preference and Mr. Word Salad.
This is a crazy
Women are not cars, bro. Women are not cars.
Do you take care of your car? Like, do you really, when it's yours and yours alone? We take a lot
I
of
don't know people driving my car, put it that way.
There was also this gem about the...
And again, we have the word this gem, right? Like, what is that? It's absolutely derogatory kind of language around it. But again, if you ask Media Watch, they probably say, well, we're just being young and hip. Gem is what the young people say.
Supposed weakness of mothers.
Well, okay. So here is, coming up is the massive double entrapment.
Front of us and in a dangerous situation where that inner instinct in us doesn't let it come out and protect. That's inherently masculine. Women, on the other hand, there's nothing wrong. It's just not their strength or their inner nature to do that.
Comments like that compelled SBS to add context to the remarks like this, reminding the audience.
Well, so again, we talk about language. SBS were compelled. So she's setting this up as if this guy, Mr. Evil here on the left, as I'm going to call him based on how they've represented him. So Mr. Bad, Mr. Villain, with his hands upheld, they've set him up as a villain, right? Like from Media Watch, from SBS, this guy's the villain. He gets spoken about. His name is used, but he's not on screen when it's used. These other guys aren't treated like that. He's the villain. And what did she say? She used a specific word. Oh, yeah, compelled to. So part of that villainy is because he's such a villain, SBS had to do these fact checks, right? Like that's what the word compelled means is if this did not happen, if he was not there saying these things, they would not be providing these fact checks. But what we know is that fact checks and context are all persuasion, and that SBS do it for all of the feed sessions. For any panel they have, they'll throw fact checks, they'll throw context over the top, but they are curated. And what's massive here in the double entrapment is that SBS have gone with mothers, and now ABC Media Watch, instead of doing their job, which is to question the media and why the media has chosen to use the word mothers, they have decided to go after this guy as the villain and double down on the idea of mothers. And I said I wouldn't show the original footage because it's too boring, and it is quite boring, I can tell you that now, having watched it a couple of times. But this particular point is critical because, as I said, these guys will want to know clarity. They will question each other on clarity. We've seen that already. So that's how they're relating to each other, and I would say that's a masculine trait. And so this question of mothers and women is important. And again, Mr. Word Salad doesn't do himself any favours. But, maybe you can say that, by the way, this is a random one. So this guy's talking about, suicide rates, etc. And again, the context here is that they've chosen to use the word loneliness is more of a contributing factor to suicide ideation, depression, and socioeconomic disadvantage in men. Around a tenth of men have made a suicide plan in their lifetime. I'm doing this off the cuff, but let's go and have a look and see if we can find out what that source was. Because, they may have just cherry-picked something, but let's see what the source is. So the source is 10 to men, AIFS. I'm going to look that up. Actually, fair play that there was nothing extra on the site rather than this.
Their own lives, because they're not feeling comfortable enough to open up.
So let's jump ahead.
In Korean, access to healthcare. So there's men to women. Men are twice as likely to engage in high risk. 12 times more men are.
And this is a really interesting fact check, right? Like, why is that second sentence necessary? Like, it's almost like some things around facts or context get a second sentence that is clarifying in a totally different area, and some don't. And so here we see the first sentence, if this fact, supposed fact, well, I believe it is a fact, by the way, but the choice of this fact was left with that first sentence, you would go, okay, that's it, I understand. But the second sentence is not relevant to the conversation that's going on, and it doesn't negate the first sentence, right? It's not like, oh, right, I see that the second sentence now adds more weight to the first sentence, etc. Like, it's not actually relevant in that sense. And we see this, that it's almost like some truths are too uncomfortable to put up there by themselves, so instead we change the story. And you could say that loneliness is one of the areas, because, you know, another thing in the report talked about how many people didn't even have a close friend, how many men do not even have a close friend. And so you think about loneliness as relationships, but also in terms of relationships with a significant other. So it's possible, and I don't know if this is true, but it's possible that you could look at loneliness as a bigger item relating to relationships and the relational health of men in Australia, which can include relationship breakdowns, for instance. But yeah, we'll come back to that, because this next fact check, again, Mr. Villain on the left here has something to say about women. And we just heard a little while ago from Media Watch talking about mothers. So as we hear the next section, I want you to pay attention to how many times he uses the word mothers. And when he finishes, I will tell you the actual statistics and the actual human behaviour that is going on here.
Incarcerated than women. Men are twice as likely to engage in high-risk addiction behaviours. Men still don't have the capabilities to seek help and reach out and find the connection they need in order to better their lives. Women have done an amazing job at rewriting their playbook and their blueprint, and I think that was a great movement, which is now...
These guys are listening to him. Mr. Pink is sitting very close to him, so it can be uncomfortable to turn around and look at someone, but they're listening to him. I don't think he has a particularly compelling voice, but he's been put in a very difficult situation, so none of this is natural. I don't think you should be judging any of these guys. This is not how they will be naturally performing, I imagine, generally.
Been achieved. What's happened with men is we've ripped up...
I did talk about Mr. Word Salad. Mr. Word Salad is going to... Mr. Villain Word Salad is going to word salad it up again. And it's interesting to me that you can think about this other guy. He has some difficulties expressing clearly some elements of his communication, and he's the villain. Now, is that a coincidence that those two things are put together, or is it convenient for the feed and for ABC to put those two things together?
The blueprint from provider protector, and then we haven't replaced it with something else. So we've created a generation of lost men, and there's nothing more dangerous to the world than lost men. The men are like, well, who the fuck am I then? Why isn't anyone telling me to find a healthy man?
Overrepresented because
is the we need who are often better at feeling innate utility and value. Just
that was a bit boring. I'm going to jump to another section. Here we go. So again, I've been delaying this for you, but it's the idea of how much does this guy talk about mothers?
Masculinity is inherently associated with like pursuits, doing more, protecting, providing. No, it's not to say that women can't be, protectors and providers, but there's no man here that you put a kid in front of us and in a dangerous situation where that inner instinct in us doesn't want to come out and protect. That's inherently masculine. Women, on the other hand, it's nothing wrong, it's just not their strength or they're in their nature to do that. Look at what's inherently true, like whether we like it or not. Men are stronger, they're better providers, we are okay working longer hours.
It's very centered.
Okay, so at no stage did he talk about mothers, and yet ABC Media Watch and SBS jump on this. And what they're doing here is changing the narrative, because what he talks about, and the data shows this, is that men are more inclined to put their own life at risk to save another person's life, whether they are known to the man or not known to the man. And in the process of that, something like 45% or 40 or 60% of men die in the process of trying to save someone else. Now, what SBS does and what ABC does is they take another fact, which is also true, which is that mothers will do a lot to save their own children. But women do not put their own lives at risk for children who are not their own or for other people to the same extent as men. And that might seem very minor, but it's important in the sense of representing the views of these guys on the panel and also representing data in a truthful and honest manner. So this guy has talking about men, and he's basically said if there is a kid in danger in front of us, and he hasn't specified whether it's his own child or another child, and I guess in a way he's sort of saying that may not be an important point. It may not be important whether they're your own children or someone else's children. We will take action and try to save them. And then he talks about women. But he, again, because it's a bit word salady, he hasn't been clear on whether these children are the children of the women or not the women. And so what you need to do is take him at face value and that he's talking about generic kids, generic men, generic women that are not related to each other.
There's no man here that you put a kid in front of us and in a dangerous situation where that inner instinct in us doesn't want to come out and protect. That's inherently masculine. Women, on the other hand, it's nothing wrong, it's just not their strength or they're in their nature to do that. Look at what's inherently true, like whether we...
And again, the second sentence, which it doesn't add anything to this particular stat or area. Like, what it can kind of say is like, hey, if a mother has a child, then she has more oxytocin and protection towards intruders, which she can apply with children generically. But he is talking about a different situation where he's just talking about if a child is in danger, so a car is running down a hill and in order to save the child, you have to jump in front of the car, push the child out of the way. You might be okay, you might not be okay, but will you do that or not? Like, that's a different situation to the example they're giving here and the idea of the hormone. So this is the massive entrapment that we see where one media organisation can take a concept, twist it, and then the second organisation, Media Watch, when reporting on the incident, can report on the reporting as if the reporting is true, as opposed to doing what used to be their job, which is to question the role of media. Let's see what else.
That mothers do indeed protect their children. Well, this comment...
And again, I don't mean to completely pick on her, but it's important to do this. Like, do indeed. Like, why do you need to put in these extra words that serve no purpose? It is to kind of give it a certain flavour on what is implicitly right or a shared understanding of what is the right attitude to take towards this. And so when she uses words like gem or is indeed or in fact or spicy, it's about forming a club. And that club is a shared opinion and a shared viewpoint on certain items and a shared implicit agreement on what is disgusting or not disgusting.
She's a beautiful woman. She can sleep with 1,000 men in the space of a month easily if she wants to.
Came with this handy context.
Do sleep with 1,000 men.
So again, handy context is like shorthand for we're going to get a bit clubby and we're going to be a bit dismissive of it.
In a month, a woman would have to sleep with 33 men a day, more than one an hour.
It should be said there were also thoughtful parts of the programme examining issues.
Okay. It's like you can pick up any of the phrases that they're using on Media Watch and pull them apart. And here's another example. It should be said. So who should be saying it? Why should it be saying it? It's again taking this moral authority and a shared understanding with the audience from Media Watch. Hey, we're going to share an opinion about this, that it should be this way. And I always think this word should is an interesting word because you see it a lot in the middle class in Australia about what should be done, what the government should be doing, or what the local council should be doing. And it's a way of commentating and actually completely distancing from the reality of what's going on. And we finish off that phrase with, there were also some thoughtful aspects. And really what we're saying here, or what she's indicating, is the rest of it was not thoughtful. So there was no thought going into anything that we've spoken about to date. It's a complete dismissal of anything that has happened to date because it wasn't thoughtful in her view, or Media Watch's view, whoever wrote this. And so it's a subjective statement, which is thoughtful, that is couched as an objective statement, like that's the reality. There was nothing thoughtful there. But actually, you know, it is at the end of the day an opinion. So it would have been better for her to say, in my opinion, I did not think there was any thought going into this. And you could say, okay, well, that's your opinion. But these way of phrasing things distance reporting from opinion. And so what we're really seeing with Media Watch here is not reporting, we're seeing opinion. And that's exactly what we see from the panellists at the beginning. Like I said, when people are in an uncomfortable situation, they can just talk about the preference. They can just talk about their opinion. And they don't need to look at what's really going on.
Issues like loneliness, mental health, and domestic violence.
Violence against women is not something that we should only be making it that makes up the
They don't know how to control it.
Terms.
There are so many reactive men.
men.
And communicating emotions.
There are so many reactive men. Options about masculinity. All those. You avoid them.
Line.
Anger.
Like this were overshadowed by the backlash after the program aired online.
Anger. As SBS aired.
When we look at, I read some of this stuff in the background, and oh my gosh, like what I spoke about earlier about SBS positioning someone as the villain. Well, now these other media agencies can just comment on the villain, and they can report what SBS says and expand upon it, and this becomes the new thing. And even here, we can see that the middle one, I hadn't seen this until now, the middle one says, Clayton Harrup, a self-proclaimed hypnotherapist and performance coach, said he believed a woman with a high body count had a chink in the armour. Well, again, that's not what I heard. He talked, in my view, about a partnership, and that if she had a high body count, it would be a chink in their collective armour. But it might have been his armour, it might have been her armour. That's not really the point. But we can see that this recycling of ideas is coming from the media itself. Like this report in the middle here talks about a self-proclaimed hypnotherapist and performance coach, and Media Watch have picked up on that and gone a so-called hypnotherapist and performance coach, or calls himself that. So what we're starting to see is the media feeding on the media's stories and amplifying the media's stories as opposed to what really happened. And again, we get some labels here. So what Media Watch gets to do is refer to them as conservative influencers because another media entity has referred to them that way.
As dangerous show with conservative influencers.
Australian TV show gets derailed by gross sex debate, giving misogyny a platform.
And again, now I come to look at this, it's like Media Watch have taken these media entities and gone, okay, how are we going to pitch this? We're going to talk about spicy content because that's like gross sex debate. So it's almost like they haven't watched it. They've just looked at the media around it and gone, oh, we can, gross sex debate, that seems to be a good phrase. Maybe we could use that. Maybe we shouldn't copy, let's call it spicy. And, well, these other guys wrote about him as a self-proclaimed hypnotherapist and performance coach. Perhaps we can use that. Or maybe let's change self-proclaimed so it's not like we're copying them, right? Like it's it's not necessarily plagiarism, but it's like let's all sing together from a particular perspective and amplify the perspectives that we want.
Form is not balance, it's negligence.
And it wasn't just the audience who were unhappy. One of the panellists described it to us as an absolute shit show. Another.
Again, we don't know which panelists, so they do kind of single it out and go, okay, which of these panelists are we going to give a pass to, and which are we going to make the villain? Because this is the intent behind, or this is the method that we see in Media Watch, is who are the villains in the panel, and they're not really questioning the role of SBS.
Jeff Kasubi wrote in Pedestrian of his experience.
Reaction took precedence over care. Not everything needs to be debated.
I went and read that article. Now, he describes himself in it as a queer guy. So he has a particular perspective. I don't necessarily agree with it, but they, again, have taken particular quotes from him. In another section, he goes, hey, maybe it wouldn't have been this way if it was moderated by a man rather than a woman, and that the studio was full of women. So he starts to give a little bit of a background, but his perspective is potentially what some people would call a bit woke, potentially. That's his brand, so he's going to stick with that. So that's where he's going to come from, potentially. But again, they have taken a particular subset of what he has said and not engaged with some of the broader things around the media entity. Again, Media Watch should be looking at the media entity, and instead they've taken bits that are about the panellists. And I do understand that each of these panellists are online commentators, so they are media entities in and of themselves. But the way they've been positioned is within a broader, larger media entity, which is SBS.
It is not a hot take. Some of these ideas are controversial, they're harmful.
So did SBS really go too far? It began the show with this disclaimer.
So again, like now we start to get to SBS. Hey, did SBS to go too far? So now Media Watch is starting to go, well, where's SBS in this? But it's pretty small effort, and let's see what she has to say.
Just a reminder, the views shared here aren't those of SBS, but they are claims and opinions that are being debated online.
And SBS is right. These ideas are being expressed online in all manner of corners and caves.
Wow. Imagine if you used the female equivalent of corners and caves. So I'm not even going to, this is how far we've got in society, that I'm not even going to give you an example of what a misogynist might say about, well, what are women's equivalents of corners and caves? But from a misandry perspective, men talking in corners and in caves sounds a bit lonely to me. Sounds a bit like these are the men that the previous report spoke about, and this is just another method to diminish the actual conversation that took place and diminish the potential for future conversations to take place, because these are conversations, she's making it clear, that only take place in corners and only take place in caves. And I mean, really, do I need to explain that is about dehumanizing men and making them buffoons or Neanderthals, right? Like it's so direct.
And it's true. The idea of body count has been debated often online, especially amongst younger people, for some time.
So body count has been debated online, especially young people, for some time. Again, when you look at word salad, you can go, well, what's she really saying there? I'm not sure exactly what she's saying, but I think if you go to any human society, and if there is a woman who is promiscuous, we know that there are consequences and debates that happen in each of those communities. It's not unique to young people. It's not unique to the online community. It is a common and profoundly prevalent societal norm. And it's important to say that a lot of that is driven by women. Women compete for status in each community, and your number of sexual partners can be a very direct and influential way to increase your status or remove competition from peers based on even just a slur of that. We know that if people just even insinuate that, that can have ramifications.
But if the aim here was to have a constructive, open debate, in key moments it fell short.
Constructive and open debate. Constructive and open debate. Well, we could see that from the first question, that it wasn't set up to be a constructive and open debate. And we saw how each of the panellists might have responded to that at different times. And I don't know, it just seems very loose, this kind of open debate. Like, what does that even mean?
An active moderator would have helped, but perhaps the primary reason it did.
Well, so here's one of the key things, again, when we look at individual words. She talks about an active moderator. Let's listen again.
An active moderator would have helped, but perhaps...
Okay, so let's take another look back here and go, is this moderator inactive? She sets up...
Online world.
She sets up the session in front of chairs. Now, where are the guys when she's doing this? Presumably they're already in the studio, or maybe she shot this after or before, but she's active. She's active here, and she's active when she asks the first question.
Sexual partners is tied to your...
She's active when she interrupts and says, I haven't heard from Mr. Beige dude in the corner. Like, which part of this is she not active in? Now, it's different to say effective or competent. Like, that's a different conversation, but there is no question that she is an active moderator. So let's listen again to what she says. And in a way, what the implication here is, if they had a moderator, these guys would not have gone off track or could have had some thoughtful conversation. As if to say, these guys couldn't be left to themselves. It was a nightmare because they were left to themselves. But in reality, they weren't left to themselves. It was the moderator who set all this up.
But if the aim here was to have a constructive, open debate, in key moments it fell short. An active moderator would have helped, but perhaps the primary reason it did not succeed is the choice of guests, including...
And so here we go. It's not only that... Yeah, I mean, again, what we see Media Watch doing is absolving SBS from the actual content and going after the individuals who were in the session. And the absolving here is, there wasn't an active moderator. Well, we can see there was. And therefore minimising the impact of that moderator. And then going back to the obvious solution then is that, well, if there wasn't an active moderator, then it has to be the guests. And so here she starts to say that it's the guests, the choice of guests is to blame here. And maybe they invited lots of other guests who didn't go on because they could see it was a potential trap or for other reasons. These guys they've chosen, I don't know if they have a large audience. I had a quick look. I didn't know of them before. So what is she going to say about the choice of guests? Is she going to say, for instance, that is she going to be specific and talk about, they're all from Sydney, or, that they're of a particular sexual persuasion? Is she going to make a judgment on some attributes of the guests? Or do you think she's going to be really broad and say something like misogynist views or influence in the online community or something? Let's hear what she said. I can't remember.
But perhaps the primary reason it did not succeed is the choice of guests, including individuals who didn't seem to be interested in a genuine discussion.
Okay. So this is a classic case of mind reading. I've done a little bit of myself in this whole session, where she says, choice of guests didn't seem to be interested in genuine discussion. How would we know? There was no real setup for genuine discussion, and potentially there was editing to remove any genuine discussion that was had. And it's mind reading at its core, which is every single one of those guys might have been super interested in having a genuine discussion, but the environment did not allow that to take place. That is equally, if not more likely, a situation. And I think you could put all of those guys back in another session where they're in a comfortable space, they know the rules of engagement, and there's a respect that is offered to them as panellists versus the way it was done.
We're never going to give an inch on their inflammatory views. Mitch Wallace said the debate...
Well, so that's pretty interesting. So never going to give an inch on their inflammatory views. So that's an example of what I was alluding to before, where I thought, how's she going to position this? Is she going to give something concrete, or is she going to give something that's very, very loose and judgmental?
Including individuals who didn't seem to be interested in a genuine discussion. And we're never going to give an inch on their inflammatory views.
And we're never going to give an inch on their inflammatory views. Like, again, it's like, well, what is a view? Is it a personal preference? Is it a judgment? And, in just 2 sentences, she has provided absolute opinion herself, right? Like, absolute opinion and judgment, and also complete dismissal, like never were going to give an inch on their inflammatory views. Well, we saw in our example that the clarification of those views was what was important, not whether they gave an inch or submitted or compromised, etc. It was more about where's the clarity on these views and why are we even talking about these things. Those are the elements that were missing.
Wallace said the debate was easily derailed.
It became very opinion-based versus fact-based, with a lot of the dialogue straying quickly from the original topic.
Other panellists were unhappy with the final product. Clayton Harrup told us.
We sat for close to 2.5 hours. I spoke at length about what masculinity truly means, and every panellist agreed with the healthy view and idea of it.
So if they sat for 2.5 hours, but the final thing was, I think, 43 minutes, then it has to have been edited.
But there was broad agreement that the debate was worthwhile. Dean Wells said.
There is always value in discussing hard topics face-to-face.
And Mitch Wallace acknowledged he understood it could have been tough to watch, but...
It allowed us to shine light on what's true, not a curated panel of what we wish was true.
While Tarang Chawla had sympathy with those who were angry at views expressed on the programme.
Some of what was said came straight from the reality TV men's influencer playbook. The fact that SBS platformed them shows how easily even the media can be duped into thinking these people bring something of value to the conversation.
That's hilarious. So what's interesting about him is, well, actually, we can see his eyes because he doesn't have those big glasses on anymore. It seems like a completely different guy on the picture on the left. Seems happy to be in the picture on the left and maybe not so happy to be on the panel. But again, we see the dismissal or diminishment of people. And when we hear phrases like these people, we know that it's an implicit clue that he has no respect for them. These people, like that's like a should in middle class Australia.
Panel discussions on controversial subjects are frequently compelling and nothing new. But this particular style of debate involving forced confrontations between more and more extreme positions has proven wildly...
Was it a forced conversation between really different positions? Or was it 6 guys who got together, potentially weren't exactly sure what they were doing there, weren't comfortable talking about the topics that were discussed, word saladed some things around, got a little bit of clarity, but ultimately it's really about the questioning and the setup that they had more than anything else. But Media Watch will probably hear, I actually have seen this already, but it's kind of like, here's where you throw to Hitler, right? It's like, oh, we've had 6 panelists, and then here's Hitler in the bunker, ergo, these guys are all fascists or something. And so she's going to show something, and she's going to say these are exactly the same.
Popular online. The Surrounded series from media company Jubilee has pitted one doctor against anti-vaxxers, one cop against criminals, and one pro...
So it's about pitting people against other people. But again, even here we can see the whole setup is completely different. Like, this is a one-on-one with an audience around them. But let's see if there's a relationship to Hitler that can be drawn between these 6 guys, because, I mean, it must be tough for them because there's a couple of people who are progressive out of the 6 people, and it'd be nice if they were all just, be able to be like at loggerheads, or we can separate them, the two of them. And I suppose this is what they're doing here, to go as if to say, hey, there were some people on the panel who were positive and progressive, and then there were other people who shut them down.
LIFA against pro-abortion activists in charged and often engrossing debates. This program, titled One Progressive versus 20 Far-Right Conservatives, ratcheted up almost 11 million views.
You're a little bit more than a far-right Republican. Hey, what can I say? I think you say I'm a fascist. Yeah, I am.
And so here we get the obligatory reference to Hitler in some form.
Absolutely.
Of course, SBS's version was not that extreme, but surely we can agree there's some...
So why show it? So why would you show like something that's that extreme and then go, oh, it wasn't quite as extreme? So what was the point of showing it? What was the point of showing these, what as she terms them, extreme things, where someone talks about being a fascist and we're as close to Hitler as we can be? Like, what's the point of doing that?
Viewpoints that don't need debating, and that includes whether women should be shamed for having a sex life.
Okay, there are points that don't need to be debated, including that women have a sex life. Again, we come back to the initial point that I made, which is we're going to make this extremely broad and talk about sex lives rather than anything else, and also that women need to be shamed. Like, again, when I take that guy's perspective, what I took from it was he didn't want the shame and the dismissal of his status if his partner was known to have had sex with the men that he was meeting day to day, right? That was his perspective, and he at no stage was he going, the women should be ashamed of that. He was thinking about the impacts on him and his partnership with a future woman. Like, what can they go out into the world to do and conquer the world with? And he felt, from what I read from his language, that if she had slept with lots of guys he's meeting, it would diminish his ability to progress in life effectively.
SBS defended its program, telling Media Watch,
engaging in the contest of ideas is central to journalism, and SBS does not flinch from debate. The feed's role...
Well, again, I would say SBS flinched from debate because they did not set up the rules of debate. I mean, even in these previous examples where they're okay, so here we have potentially a debate. We have two people facing each other.
Say, I'm a fascist. Yeah, I am.
And it looks like they've got some kind of clock, or they'll have certain rules. There's flags, right? Like, I'm prepared to bet, I haven't watched this show, but I'm prepared to bet that there's a lot of structure and rules around how this debate works. So to say that SBS doesn't flinch from debate is because they don't actually engage in debate in this session. They just put six guys together, ask them a question that's entrapping, and then expect the guys to get out of that trap themselves.
Flinch from debate. The feed's role is to facilitate challenging conversations. This program was balanced and accurately represented the views expressed.
This was an important discussion, and credit to SBS for having a crack. But the fundamentals...
An important discussion, having a crack. Like, again, having a crack. These minor points of language are all about diminishing. Gem, handy, having a crack. You know, would she have said having a crack if it was around, SBS interviewing survivors of domestic violence? Like, let's say that program wasn't particularly good. It had bad audio, or it was difficult to understand the women that were there, or it didn't even present like very many ideas about domestic violence. It just showed victims. Would she have said it's good that SBS had a crack? No, because the general public would see that as diminishing the role of femininity and areas of important discussion. But she can say having a crack about masculinity because that's in caves and in corners. And so this is how this works, in the sense that the more of these little phrases you can build up over time, the more easy it is to throw a new one in because it's not out of place. Like, again, you go back to the start of this and you take all of these phrases and you put them into her introduction to this segment, and you say something like, SBS had a crack at this little gem of a handy session on some spicy content, right? Like, it stands out as being very, very odd and out of character. And the way they've done this is that you can get used to anything in life. And by normalizing this kind of language around these particular topics, you can create a shared understanding that they're not important, and that you can pick and choose which elements are in a corner or in a cave, and you can pick and choose which elements need to be pulled out of this and given their own platform. Because the danger here is sharing the platform around things like domestic violence, which Media Watch and other organisations would presumably believe is something that is important and should be spoken about seriously, but pulling that away from masculinity. So typically what is done here is, instead of starting with masculinity, these kind of programs will start with the fault in society, domestic violence, for example, and then from there talk about the role of masculinity in relation to domestic violence.
Of debates are openness and respect, and just because something is expressed online does not make it right to air.
So again, this is a bit word salady, but views expressed online doesn't mean it's right to air them. Like, what is online, what's not off online? Media Watch itself is on YouTube. The SBS, the feed, is on YouTube. So there's this blurring of what is online, what is offline, and it's, again, another shorthand to say online bad, public broadcaster good, public broadcaster online is not online. You know, like, it's like this kind of shorthand. What else did she say?
But the fundamentals of debates are openness and respect, and just
openness and respect. Again, I talked about how these guys needed to establish how they respected each other. They needed to establish the rules of the game. And ultimately, they were paying respect to the producer and expecting the producer to establish the rules of the game. But what the producer did instead was establish a respect by highlighting the villain, Mr. Word Salad, and then allowing different interruptions and different perspectives to take place, and the respect nature of amongst that group was pretty loose and pretty changing. And I felt that they did all they all did their best to try and establish that. None of them seemed to get in a fight, so I think that's always a good step.
because something is expressed online does not make it right to air. When offensive remarks are given prominence, they...
Like, what does she mean by right to air and offensive comments? Like, what specifically was offensive and to whom? Like, was that what that guy said offensive to a woman who's had 5 sexual partners? And he's gone, well, you know, he's basically saying, I would consider you as a future partner, that we can build a life together. Is she like, oh, is it offensive to her because, oh, well, I can only have 5 more and then I'm out of the loop because once it's 10, I won't get that one guy, right? Like, there are things here where individual choices are couched as judgment. And, yeah.
And undermine the entire undertaking. Good debate requires good faith, especially on a public broadcaster.
And with that, I have asked Media Watch, I've sent them a bunch of questions. I only did that a short time ago, so to be fair to them, they haven't had much time to respond. But if they do respond, jump down to the description. You can read how they've responded to these questions. And you'll also find the links to the original clips there. Because, you know, I have put this to Media Watch that the way they have represented this is actually part of their closure, which is about public broadcasters. So what has she got to say again?
Remarks are given prominence, they can undermine the entire undertaking. Good debate requires good faith, especially on a public broadcaster.
So good faith, I've asked the question around good faith. Good faith is about honest and transparent delivery of information. And what we can clearly see from what I've shown is that they have set this one guy up to be a villain. The whole setup has been an absolute nightmare for each of these guys. And why is it a nightmare? Well, the producers of the feed have chosen a particular style of so-called debate, but not really a debate. And Media Watch and SBS have decided not to look at the media in relation to this, but instead attack the panellists, because the panellists are each their own media personalities, for want of a better word. And so that's the question I have put to Media Watch, which is really, in an Australian context, have these guys given the panellists a fair go, and have they done their job to look at the media and watch the media? And my answer to that is, I hope you enjoyed the session. Catch you later. Bye.